Hey, it's nice to finally meet you.
You too. Uh, what a phenomena.
Right.
You are a movement now, I would say. Uh,
Yeah.
it's true. Uh, did you even imagine ever it's going to be like that?
I think one of the biggest joys of being queer is that I constantly exceed my own imagination of myself. So,
Mm.
in that way, I imagine the things that I could never imagine. So the answer is yes and no.
I believe that what you do is because you believed in it, not because of the consequences that it might be. And
Right.
that's why it is what it is today.
Right.
It's
Right.
not
Right.
because you made a plan to do this. I would imagine. Uh, I'm sure I'm correct on that. Uh, but I don't know what to call you: artist, poet, performer,
I'm not sure
fashionista.
what to call myself either. I'll just say I call myself happy and I go from there.
Yeah, and I think this conversation should be like your blog. The table was my first stage, which I loved, which you
Thank
wrote
you.
on.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's something about your story which is I connect with it so much because I don't know why. Maybe it's because of our Indianness, or maybe it's because of there's something going on there which makes me feel like, oh, I've been through this. It's just that
Mm,
20 years before you, but that's it. Like, I've been through
mm,
this. This happened to me, or this
mm.
dinner table conversations. Yeah, there is a huge uh, similarity, and I was very uh, not surprised. I was quite curious and excited about that.
I
Uh,
think it's also probably about what it means to live a creative life.
mm,
You have to become a sort of sponge or a mirror and just
yeah,
continually observe the things around you. And so it shifts the way that you live your life because there's no part of it that's outside of your art practice. It becomes every conversation, every encounter, every color you see on the street becomes part of your mood board to that you're taking
yeah.
back and you're creating from. So what I find is that especially a lot of designers have a different way of training their eyes to see things differently than other people do.
Yeah, about the color, I mean, as we are Indians, but I'm from India, though I live in
Mm,
France now. But for me, it was very normal to see women. I'm talking about when I was younger,
right,
women wearing red, blue, green, orange, purple, all together, and still look very convincing and
right,
aesthetically perfect,
right,
unknowingly,
right.
though. And this is what I carried with my work when I came to France. And color for us is very normal, isn't it?
Right,
It seems like,
exactly. And I grew up
whereas,
with like my Indian community, very colorful, but then in a
mm,
largely sort of white conservative town, absolutely no color whatsoever. And it always confused me because the way that people would describe my style would be like power clashing or color. And I was like, when it comes to Indian fashion, those words don't really make sense.
they
Like,
don't exist.
yeah, like it's not that we're clashing, it's just actually the way that
No.
we compose an outfit, or it's not that we're
Yeah.
actively trying to be colorful, it's just already the
Uh,
prototype that we're operating from.
I've always compared the Indian use of colors to the way we eat. When we eat
Hmm.
Indian food, we have 10 different things in a plate, what we
Right,
call a thali. We'll have the dal, we'll have the meat, we'll have 10 different things, but in fact, all together, it tastes amazing.
right,
And
right,
this is what my relation to fashion is also with. We can use any colors we want, there's no rule.
right.
And
There's
somehow, when Indians like we do it, it comes out very convincing.
very convincing, and everything looks good on our skin tones for sure. So
Of
we have
course.
we have a little bit of an advantage there. But it's just funny, like how much anxiety color gives Western fashion. Like so many people tell me, I've always wanted to wear color. I've just been so afraid. It's so confusing because I think that many people get dressed to disappear themselves, which feels like a contradiction. Where I get
I do
dressed
the
to draw
opposite. Yeah,
attention.
of
Yes,
course.
totally.
I mean,
And
when I walk into a room, I want everybody to notice me, obviously.
that's the point of fashion, truly.
Of course. Why would you do
And
fashion otherwise?
it's really embarrassing to me that people can call it fashion when it's just a uniform. I think fashion should be the opposite of a uniform. It should be something that is your personal fingerprint on the world, something that people are reminded about your singular identity and point of view. It's about your creativity and individuality.
But it used to be like that. It
What do
used
you
to be
think
that way.
happened?
Exactly. I don't know. I think now it's all become about brands, and
Mm,
it's not about. When I was learning fashion, I used to look up to Thierry Mugler or John Galliano for Dior. Those were really individual characters.
right,
They had such strong statement. You could recognize their clothes from far. You could
right.
say, okay, this one is this one is this. I think over the time, fashion is that time fashion was about, yes, I want to create something and I want people to dress like my vision.
Mm,
Whereas today I feel fashion is that, oh, I should make what they want to buy.
mm, mm,
And this is
mm,
a big problem, I would say, in a way. Today, one makes clothes for what the consumer wants instead of not
mm,
telling consumer that this is what you should wear.
mm.
And
I
that,
think maybe part of that has to do with the rise of influencer culture
yeah,
and social media optics, where in some ways it champions itself as like promoting individual self-expression, but in other ways it's very much about aspiring or emulating to look like someone else. And there's this weird way in which people continually find it very difficult to be their own self. They have to look like someone else or have a frame of reference or have like someone that they're trying to look like. And I've never experienced my fashion journey like that. It's always been about trying to look like myself versus trying to look like someone else. And I think for that, it involves having a self-image. And I think one of the things that social media disincentivizes is looking at yourself. It's so much about looking at other people, what they're doing, observing externally. But for me, fashion is actually kind of a spiritual process of looking internally to say,
of course,
what are the emotions that I have? What are the points of view that I have, and how do I communicate that externally? You have to do that internal work first.
yeah. And the most important is what makes me feel good.
Hmm.
What makes me feel good? Why am I dressed like this? Because it's for me. And it's
Yes.
another matter that, of course, it makes us stand out. That's an advantage. But primarily, it starts with why do I feel wear this? Because it makes me feel wow.
I mean, what you're
It is.
saying is so threatening to a fashion industry that often relies on what looks good to other people. I think that's really the where it boils down to, is that fashion has become so concerned with getting other people's approval rather than prioritizing one's own joy. And I think that the people who I admire creatively are the people who you can tell are pursuing their own joy, their
Yeah,
own reckless joy,
yeah.
even if other people don't understand what they're doing. So some of the like worst reviewed collections I love because I'm like, oh my gosh, you can really see this person is having such a great time here.
Trust me, I've got bad reviews quite a few times, but no regrets. Yeah, it's. But unfortunately for individual brands, I am a part of that. Uh, Not a big, like not the big ones. It's very difficult to survive just
Mm,
expressing your own vision, and one does. I'm very proud that I managed to just do what I wanted, including my last show that I did 2 weeks ago in London, where I decided I want a gang of my family, of creatures, I call them, be it Daniel Lismore or Charity Case or Pandemonia. I'm sure you know who they are. Uh, to gather them and to do a show, it takes a lot of courage. Yet, at the same time, does it result into that many sales? Maybe not.
right,
Does it creatively satisfy you? Yes, it does.
right. I wanted to ask you because, when I speak to a lot of indie designers, they tell me that the market is so saturated by wedding wear
Mm.
and bridal wear, and that when you try to really play around with what you're doing, there's not really as much of a market in India. Do you see a different clientele in India versus in diaspora or abroad in terms of what kind of items people are looking for?
Well, it's a good subject, bridal wear. I did delve in it at some point, and I don't know how much you. So what happens is when you do a wedding outfit, no offense to any in other Indian designer or any of that sort, but if you look in photographs, you can't differentiate which designer is what
Hmm.
or who, and
Hmm.
that comes from if you go to do weddings, it's the whole family which is involved in that
Right.
bride's outfit. It's the whole family is involved in bridegroom's outfit. The designer has very less to say in the matter most of the time. It's about
Hmm.
they want this color, this is the background, this is the stage, this is the mandap, all of that. It's not a creative outlet. It's a purely money making business, I would say, the
Right.
bridal market, which is fine.
Right.
It's huge, the bridal market in India, but I don't consider that fashion.
Hmm.
It is not fashion for me. It is
Hmm.
bridal clothes. It's not a vision. It is not
Hmm.
saying that this season I want everybody to wear so and so things or so and so silhouette. It's not. In fact, if you look at the bridal wear, it doesn't have many silhouettes.
Right.
It's it has what you call the lenga, the blouse, and the dupatta. Okay, there are versions
Right.
of that mostly.
But it all
Maybe
derives
now,
from that. Yeah.
yeah, it's traditional. It's not fashion.
Hmm.
For I mean, but that's my personal opinion. It's
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
a chance to express what next season I imagine women or slash men or everybody to wear.
Hmm.
It is quite restrictive, and it's most of the bridal wear is remakes of historical garments or
Right.
motifs, or it's not moving in a new direction. It's just recreating ancient textiles or embroideries, pretty much, and
Right.
in very limited silhouettes.
Right. 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 And it's
You
interesting that
know
when
what I'm saying?
people think about Indian fashion, they conflate it with bridal wear. And it, in some ways, holds back what the potential for an Indian designer is. It's not
Yeah,
seen as Indian wear or non-Western wear unless it's adjacent to bridal wear. But I would say that even if you're designing a gown, it's still Indian clothes, you know? If you're
right.
making a t-shirt, it's still Indian clothes because you're an Indian designer making clothes with India in mind. But I still
Yeah,
think that in people's heads, when they hear Indian clothes, they're just
Indian fashion.
thinking
Yeah,
this sort of,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it's true though. Uh, this is what a challenge I had when I left India and started London Fashion Week, and then I started Paris Fashion Week. I was like, I cannot be too ethnic. It will last
Hmm.
me maybe a couple of seasons. That's
Hmm.
all. I cannot go face such huge competition with international designers. Yet I cannot forget that I'm from India.
Hmm.
That is my advantage to take India with me, but
Right.
not in the ethnic visualness of it. So what
Hmm.
does one do? I had the advantage of using the embroideries, the ancient techniques, the textiles, the brocades from Banaras or embroideries from Lucknow, but I could not have taken traditional motifs. So there I was making garments inspired by Candy Crush or Game of Thrones or
Right. Right.
various themes, but using ancient techniques that
Right.
to represent the embellishment so that could nobody else could do that. But if I had to take traditional clothes and start showing in international fashion weeks, I would have not survived for more than a few seasons.
Right. But I love that because I think it gives permission to a lot of Indian designers to actually think outside the box and not feel restricted. I think what you keep on sort of telling us is that fashion should be without restriction. It should
It's supposed to
be,
be.
yeah, it should be about creativity. And I see that in my own work too. It's so annoying as an artist to have to be put into categories of like, okay,
Yeah,
this is where you belong.
yeah,
This is what you should be doing. This is what we expect. Because that's actually counterintuitive to my creative process. When I'm making work, I'm not thinking, what form is this going to take? I'm thinking more about flow or energy or idea. And these things can't be fit or cohered into boxes. And that's why I think I champion so hard for gender-free fashion, is because in the same way that I think it's absurd that we say certain clothes are Indian clothes, certain clothes are non-Indian clothes, I think it's really strange that we say women's clothes, men's clothes, when in fact they're just all garments that can be worn by anyone. And it's
I think this
weird
is
because,
clothing.
yeah,
It's
it's just
simply
clothing.
clothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's up to you if you want to wear it. You could be a man, woman, whatever, who knows? But it's simply clothing. And
Mm,
if you look at the history of Indian fashion, I'm talking about centuries ago, men dressed, they probably took longer time to get dressed than women.
right, right.
And yeah, and the amount of jewels and the creations and the collections they had for personal collections that they consumed themselves was immense. It
Hmm,
was, I don't know what happened in
mm.
between. Maybe you know, maybe you read about, I don't know what happened between that and now.
I
And
know, and
now,
it's a story of conformity and colonialism and power and misogyny and all these horrible things. And I think that's what's so embarrassing is when other Indian people get mad at me for what I wear, for wearing things that they regard as
tell
too
me,
feminine.
I want to know. I want to know why. Why? What do they say? Tell me, what do they say?
Well, they just basically say, like, boys shouldn't look like that, and Indian men are being feminized. And oh my God, this is the crisis of India now, is that these people are out here. It's just homophobia, transphobia, and sexism. But it's just so funny because
Basically,
they don't know their own history. They don't know that just a couple of hundred years before, they would be looking like me too. They'd be wearing
or
these
even
jewels too.
10 times more.
Right, totally. And so it's just
Yeah,
embarrassing because I think what we're talking about here is that there's a definition of Indianness, be it in terms of thinking about quote ethnic wear or quote binary gender, that's not actually historically true. And yet people hold on to it so vehemently. And it's embarrassing because it actually doesn't just harm me, it harms them. I mean, look at their outfits, they're so boring. I
yeah,
just
that's so boring.
imagine that if people actually allowed themselves permission to be free and to express their gender on their own terms and their beauty on their own terms, they would be wearing so much more exciting things.
They will look exciting. They will stand out. I don't know. Well, what you said about gender neutrality is the death of. It's not the death of fashion. It's the renaissance of fashion, which is exactly
Mm,
what we are talking about right now. It's so damn right. I'm hoping. I'm wishing really with what's going on with fashion right now, because we will take us to a stage, hopefully, where we can express. I mean, we always did, but I'm talking about everyone will be able to express more than ever before in recent times. I feel it can go there,
mm, mm. I
and I
hope.
think it is. But you are a strong influence in that. You are a strong, you're a messenger or like a carrier of that flag. In a way.
It's
Uh,
interesting because a lot of designers tell me that they agree with what I'm saying. They're like, okay, obviously clothing has no gender, anyone can wear it. But they're just afraid because of that point you're making before about the market. They're
yeah,
afraid that their market isn't ready for it yet and that they're going to isolate potential customers or irritate or piss off people who would buy their clothes or support their brands. And that's always felt like a cop out to me because it's like, I don't get to opt out of homophobia and transphobia. I have to deal with it every day, everywhere I go. And so a lot of these brands and fashion industries during Pride Month will say like, oh gosh, we support the LGBTQ community, but they even have to deal with 1/10 of the kind of backlash that we get. And then they're like, no, we can't do it at all. So how can you on the one hand congratulate us on our visibility and then yet be so timid in your own? I feel like what we really need in the fashion industry is more people who are willing to take bold and unapologetic stances, because that's how
fashion was
fashion
about.
changes.
Fashion was always about taking risks.
Mm,
That it was always connected to risk, and that's what they need to do. And that's me going back to what we spoke before. And that is the reason why it's also becoming boring in a way overall. Nobody wants to take the risk. Nobody wants to take the risk. It's unfortunate, uh, but such are the times. That's why this new mini revolution, which is starting now, of people like you or my friends who did my show in London or a few years ago in Paris, be it Is She Hungry or a few
Right,
others I spoke about, they are believing in it. And now a huge community is following them
right, right,
and they are uh, accepting it in a way.
right, right. I've always
So I've always,
admired I've always admired the way that you cast your shows because I've seen people who I followed as an artist just included. It feels like you collaborate with other artists. It's not, I think the way that casting has often historically happened is that the model is just supposed to be mute and to be the canvas only for the designer. But what I really appreciate about it seems like your approach to casting is you're working with artists who already have a very developed persona or sense of style. And it feels more collaborative, like you're accentuating what they're bringing to the table in terms of their art. What is your approach to casting?
I, I feel like the whole era of using models as hangers,
Hmm,
literally, is so 2000. It's so early 2000. It's not. I don't believe in it. For me,
right,
when I do a show, it's the whole world. I consider myself more of a visual director than just a fashion designer. So for me, it's all about who's wearing it, where it is, the whole feel. I sometimes even adapt my collection to the characters that I'm going to use for my show. Like, for example, Charity Case. Uh, they wanted to wear this. I don't know if you saw the show, but it is kind of a creaturey mask with big mouth. I said, okay, then let's match the garment with that. So it's a collaboration. Yes, it's my vision, but it's a collaboration with all of them. This is my family.
hmm,
I in fact call my shows usually We Are Family, part one,
hmm,
part two, because this is my family I've chosen. And the chosen
hmm,
family is always more closer to you than the family you're
hmm.
born with. And
Always,
these are my always. You know that. I
yeah,
mean I read that. Yeah. So this is your chosen family. You have an advantage. I'm lucky to have somehow, I don't know how, build a relationship with all these people who are my current family.
right, right,
And why not celebrate anything that I do or achieve with them?
right,
Why shouldn't I include them in all my celebrations? It's as
right.
simple as that.
It strikes me that you were talking before about how Indian bridal wear is so linked to the family and there's so little choice because everyone's involved, and how your fashion is linked to a different conception of family. And it connects back to what we were saying before about getting dressed for yourself, getting dressed for other people. I think it was my chosen family that first gave me permission to dress as myself because I had never had anyone else tell me. Like, I remember one of the biggest arguments I had with my mother is when I was packing up to go to college. I had something like 5 suitcases of clothes, and I was like insistent
I
on bringing them up.
guess what? I have I have marked that in my I have highlighted that part
Oh,
because I
really?
had a yeah, yeah, yeah. I have highlighted that saying, and I need to talk about that uh, because when I left my family, and I
Hmm,
come from India, so it's very conservative. I
right,
was 17, born in Bombay, but in the back of the suburbs. And when I decided to tell my mother that I am going to Delhi, not even far from Bombay to Delhi,
right.
to study fashion, it was drama, of course.
Drama.
Yeah, yeah, and it struck me when I read that. I was like, you had a different kind of drama because of your suitcase and your
Right.
wardrobe, but I also had a kind of drama. But then I tell myself, why did I want to leave? Of course, I wanted to learn fashion, but another reason was I wanted to be free.
Right.
And I'm talking about in 1991
Right.
in India. It was not easy to express yourself.
Right.
coming from a very simple Punjabi family.
Right.
So the only way was to escape and go and study somewhere else, and where you can have the freedom to be yourself. It started there.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
of course, now the things are different, and now it's all fine. Things have changed. I think India is it's uh, progressing a lot
Right.
faster than I imagined. I don't. Do you go to India?
I do. Yeah, I tend to spend a month there every year. I haven't been back since the pandemic, but I do go back
Mm,
quite a bit, and I do see it changing. But I also think that that's thanks to people like you. You know, you're saying you left in 91. That's the year I was born. So in so many ways, the kind of freedom that your generation was styling for us made it easier for us to come in and sort of expand. And I've been thinking about that a lot, you know, because I recently lost my aunt Orvashi, who
mm.
was a very prominent lesbian Indian feminist and activist here in the United States. And she was born in Delhi and went back a lot with us. We still have family there. And it's become very clear to me the importance of intergenerational connection,
Mm.
because I think my generation always thinks that we're unprecedented or that we're the first, but it's so wrong. And
No,
people were dealing with the same dynamics and the same crises and the same pushback decades and centuries prior to us. But I think because we often don't have space for intergenerational dialogue, we're not able to hold that we actually are facing the same things, and that we might have had different language for them at the time, but they were the same concepts of
I
restriction and conformity.
I think our my generation suffered a lot more than what it is today. Today things are much more, well, not everywhere, but at least in prime cities in India, it's much more easier than. And I would say, in a way, as you know, Bollywood rules India, and
Hmm.
some credit goes to them too. Lately, they have been coming out with movies which for a person sitting in a small town who watches it can somehow fathom the fact that okay, this is existing, this is true.
Right.
But at our time, it was complicated. It was complicated. In fact, it was dangerous. It was dangerous to be a homosexual those days when I was a teenager. We could not, uh, even though we had expression or urge to spend time with the same sex person, or we could not.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was highly frustrating, and that would lead us into doing dangerous things.
Right.
It will lead us into taking risks of another kind, which might, I mean, I don't want to talk about that all that in details, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But we did, because we had this desire to fulfill, and we could not express. I don't think that is there anymore, even in India. Now it's much more open. And I
Hmm.
can really take India as a context for that time because I was there. But it was, I mean, I survived, but a lot of others didn't, taking
Right.
risks. And if things were more open, more acceptable, like they are today, they may have still been existing.
Right. Totally. I
Yeah.
see in your work, you know, with your use of hearts and colors and fun catchphrases, like a deep and earnest commitment to hope and optimism. And I, as a comedian, try to explain to people the reason why I believe in hope and levity and humor is because the world is so hard. It's because I've known sorrow that I know joy. I don't think you can know joy unless you know sorrow. So just hearing your story now makes a lot of your design decisions make sense
Yeah.
because you've known suffering, because
A
you've
lot.
known loss or you've known pain. Then fashion actually becomes a place where you're trying to heal or template possibility or freedom. Is there a relationship between struggle and design for you?
I think creativity is always connected to struggle. I
Hmm.
believe the more you struggle, the more creative you are. The
Hmm.
more you are unaware of things around you, the more creative you can be, the more original you are. Similar concept. And I believe that it came, like you said before, you cannot experience happiness if you've not experienced sorrow.
Right.
The more happiness you experience is because more sorrow you had.
Right.
I do believe, I do believe that even if it's not true every day, I like to say life is beautiful, no
Mm,
matter what. And it's it's three emotions: it's happiness, joy, and celebration. These are the three emotions that I like to bring with anything I do, be it fashion or art or various projects. And this is the emotion, if I bring to audience who comes to me to see my clothes or wear my clothes, I think I am fine. But to
mm.
reach that level and to show all of that happiness, joy, and celebration, it comes with a lot of uh, struggle or suffering in the past.
Mm, mm, mm.
But this is
Yeah.
the way to let it out, like you said.
That's why I dress the way that I do. It's because I
Of
know
course.
that people are going to disrespect me or harass me or make me feel bad, but I want to make myself feel good.
Yeah.
So if I'm wearing
In
really
spite
fun
of that.
earrings,
In
right?
spite of that, you want to do it. Yeah.
If I'm wearing a lot of color or if I'm having a lot of fun with my outfit, it brings me joy even amidst so much sorrow. And I think in that way,
Yeah.
fashion is a companion that actually allows me to return to levity and joy and humor and camp and fun and exhilaration in a world that's trying to restrict me or mute me. And I think in that way, fashion is part of my healing practice. Because if I was to just live life on their terms, by which I mean be boring, then life wouldn't be worth living. So I
Just-
always have to, I have to ask myself, how do I make life worth living? And fashion is about making life worth living. I don't want to live in a world where people all look the same, and it's just
and like you
tragic
said
to me.
before, which like I said before, it's about taking risk, and you're doing that.
Right.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're taking a risk to make sure that you get joy.
And
I
it's
hope,
weird
I wish
because
every.
people look at people like me who, like, I'm walking around New York City in a practical 7-inch heel, a mini skirt, like a corset. I'm just minding my own business, looking fabulous, right? And so people always look at me like, oh my gosh, you're such an exhibitionist. You dress this way because you want to draw attention to. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe what, but really what it's about is I'm exhibiting myself to myself. I
Yeah.
want to be able to take my own camera, my own selfie camera, look at my own reaction to my face and be like,
and
oh my God,
and feel wow, feel wow.
yes,
Like,
yes. And people always like, I
yeah,
mean, the other day I was just in LA, which don't get me started on LA, the most unfashionable place in the world, if you ask me. I was walking down the street in LA and this person was like, oh my gosh, what are you dressed up for? You look so great. And I said, I'm dressed up to be alive. It's so
yeah,
weird to me that people think you would just have to dress up for a special event or function, but the special event is being here. Because
yeah.
when you know sorrow, you know that you could have not been here. You've lost a lot of people. And so you know that you have to celebrate being here because it's not taken for granted.
Me and my partner, I mean, we live together, and we go to buy vegetable in the market outside the house. We dress up to go and buy
Mm,
vegetables. Come on, why not? It's a right to do that. I mean, Paris can be very boring too. Huh? I don't know how often do you come here, but
it is. And
it
I'm
can be
I'm gonna
very.
be there in July. I'm gonna send you an invitation. You must come to my show.
I'm coming. What are the dates?
July 8th.
Ah, shit. I'm not
No.
there from 30th June to July 10th.
Okay, we'll have to have it another time.
Are you staying longer?
I think I'll be there the 8th and the 9th, and then maybe the 10th, but I think just the 8th and
I'm back on the 10th.
9th.
But I would love to see your show. I saw some of it on YouTube, but I think it's not the same as actually being
No,
there.
definitely not the same. And I'm much more
Yeah,
funny now, I promise.
yeah. I loved
um,
the one where you were wearing this pink dress and you started talking about how when straight people approach us, you approach them as if we were which we are the normal ones. But I
right.
thought that was so ridiculous. That was so funny. And
Yeah, imagine being upset about what someone is wearing. Like, I just spent a lot of time thinking, I'm like, to all of these haters in my comment sections, like, I'm so sorry that you're spending your day hating on me when you could be like learning how to do a cat eye on a YouTube video, playing video games, hanging out with your friends, having a picnic, having a party. Like, that's what I really want people to understand, is that I'm not the oppressed one because I'm free. It's the other people who are still held back by caring about boring social conventions, like what will other people think, or what do men wear, what do women wear. They spend all of their time destroying and denying their
Yeah.
soul. And
In fact,
so,
they haven't met their soul.
right, right.
You know, they haven't met their soul. I would like to believe, because if
Yeah.
they
And
did,
and and I think fashion for me has been such an instrumental part of me meeting my soul, actually. And that's why I don't
yeah,
think that there's anything superficial about fashion. I get really annoyed when people dismiss fashion as excessive or ridiculous or not important, because fashion has actually been deeply related to my emotional healing spiritual journey, because it took me a lot of self internal work
yeah.
to get to the place where I could wear whatever I wanted in public, especially as an Indian person, where from a very young age I was taught your worth is what other people think about you. So what the
I mean,
lessons
that's
that I was
so India.
installed in,
That is
so
so
India, right?
India. Oh my God, that annoys me. It annoys me that people spend their, and I think I'm glad you're talking about this right now. I'm glad this is going to be written somewhere. And, it's annoying that Indians, a lot of Indians, live all their lives without finding themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
They only live about what are the surroundings, who's saying what, or he might be saying that, or thinking that, or on that perception, which may not even be true. You
Right.
spend all your life, you spend all
It's
your
so much
life
about
living like
what
that.
what will people think, but it's never
Yeah,
what do you think.
yeah. And this is something which is very important for Indians to know. I hope they realize it's not about anybody else. It's about you.
Right.
It is about you.
Right.
Well, I think on that note, we are quite good.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you so
please,
much for speaking with me.
you do you. Please continue doing
You do
you.
you too. Yeah. Continue